Welcome everybody to this first podcast episode of Waking Up, Growing Up. I'm very happy that this is finally all coming to fruition because I had this idea for a podcast for something around 2 years, maybe even a little bit more than that. But I knew back then that it simply wasn't the right time. But I really do feel like now is the right time for me to just expand on what I'm doing to have more ways and forms or more opportunities, I would say, to reach people. And I just think this form of having a podcast is just in general something really great because it just allows me, and even in conversations with other people, to really dive way deeper into topics than I would just usually do it on my YouTube videos. And I decided to name this podcast Waking Up, Growing Up, because it points to two different but not mutually exclusive ways or paths of development. And there's the English way of describing our existence, which is to call ourselves human beings. And even in this name, human being, which I guess I learned from Eckhart Tolle, there's the one part, which is the human part, but there's also the other part, which is the being part. And the human part is the part of growing up, and the being part is the part of waking up. And in general, especially in our Western culture, the big emphasis lies on growing up, on developing yourself, on developing your perspectives, your behavior, your ethics, everything that just revolves around your personal ego identity. But something which has been way more prevalent or in the spotlight, so to speak, in the eastern parts of the world or in India, in Asia in general, is the path of waking up, of transcending your human identity to find an identity that is way bigger and way more inclusive than your personal identity, than your ego could ever be. And one could call this the ultimate identity or the highest identity, but it's beside the point on what you want to call it. In the end, it's just about expanding your consciousness, expanding your awareness for yourself, your surroundings, and eventually everything that exists, which is also, I guess, the goal, if there's any goal, in Zen Buddhism. So for this first episode, and I'm really happy that I was able to make this happen, or that he agreed to do this with me. In this first episode, I have a conversation with Scott Odom. And I got to know Scott through Instagram, through the story of a Soto Zen Buddhist named Koshi Shiril. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce his name. But anyways, I eventually somehow ended up on Scott's profile, and I just saw a very, very genuine human being. A human being who's maybe a little bit older than me, but who just encompasses so much wisdom and clarity and loving kindness, I guess, and also a little bit of being a badass. and being someone who's absolutely real with himself and other people and the way he speaks and the way, just the way he talks. So when I found his profile, I was just immediately touched by how he spoke about reality, about life, death, and love, and about practicing something spiritually, like having a spiritual practice. And I just saw that he's a very dedicated practitioner, a Tibetan Buddhist, or simply, I guess, as he would say, a very curious human being. And without further ado, in this episode, we talk about life and death, but also his Jiu-Jitsu practice, his career as a police officer in the USA, which he now retired from, but also just in general how he faced crises in his own life and how he was able to overcome them, how he was able to overcome misusing alcohol as a way of just numbing himself and escaping from life, and how he eventually found Tibetan Buddhism and his own practice and teachers and spiritual guides who were able to help him. I guess who were able to help him in finding clarity and love and acceptance in his own life. And we also talk about how he eventually found psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, as an aid in his own spiritual practice. And we also talk about a whole lot of other topics like the school shootings or the shootings in general that have been happening in the USA. We also talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And at the end of this episode, which is really probably the most amazing part of this episode, we talk about his advice on being in a relationship, because he's been in a relationship for 36 years, or I think even married for 36 years. And we just had a lot to unpack. This is a very long episode. It's almost 3 hours long. And I think even though the end is very amazing or very much spoke to me, the whole episode was very therapeutic just for myself. So if you're able to take anything away from this, I'm just very happy. And in general, I'm just very happy to share this with the world. So without further ado, this is episode 1 of Waking Up, Growing Up with Scott Odom. Maybe you can just give us like a short overview on just who you are, what you do, and then we can just pick up from there.
Sure, Alex. I'm Scott. I'm a retired cop. I did that job for 28 years. That work, I guess, led me to look for a way to deal with the suffering that I was encountering and living with. And it led me into Tibetan Buddhism. And once I made that connection with Tibetan Buddhism and saw how powerfully and profoundly it affected my life and did eradicate that deep suffering, I was off to the races, and I really dove into it as fully as I could. That's been 18 years now of really dedicated practice and
Wow.
commitment to that path. And I would say probably 6 or 7 years ago, I started to do some more work on the spiritual path with plant medicines, specifically in the Santo Daime church, working with ayahuasca as a sacrament, and also utilizing mushrooms for the same purpose, but that was more on my own rather than in a church setting. And I found that really beneficial adjunct to my primary practices. Um, and now, yeah, I think my spiritual path led me to retire from police work as soon as I possibly could to um, get out of that life and be able to dedicate myself full time to pursuing this spiritual path. So that's what I've been doing. My wife and I, uh, when I retired, we sold our house, bought an Airstream trailer, and traveled through the United States uh, without a place to live, just living out of the trailer for 4.5 years. And then recently we settled in Desert Hot Springs near Palm Springs, California, and we've been here for a couple of years. But that's my life. I'm retired. I practice. I run a small meditation group here that meets weekly for meditation, and we do some uh, Buddhist studies on the side a little bit. Um, but yeah, I feel really incredibly blessed to have made this connection with the teachers that I've encountered, the Dharma that I've encountered, and other people like you, practitioners that mostly I meet through Instagram. Um, but it's hard when you live in any small community to connect with practitioners that are really dedicated and really interested in what they're doing and have committed themselves to that. And I think there's definitely a little subculture through Instagram of uh, quite a few really serious committed practitioners, not necessarily Tibetan Buddhism, but on any path. To
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
the defining prerequisite is, are you interested? Are you committed? Are you wholeheartedly involved in what you're doing on the path? And if you're like that, I'm all about it. I want to hang out with you. I want to see what you have to say. I want to share those experiences. Um, so yeah, that's a thumbnail sketch of where I am.
Yeah, it's pretty good, pretty extensive already. I think something I forgot in my introduction is just to thank you in the first place, just for being here, to doing this with me. I think it's pretty awesome.
Well, it's my pleasure, Alex. I'm really happy to have connected with you, to have met you, and I think you bring a beautiful light and presence and awareness to what you're doing. So I'm very happy to be connected with you and do this thing with you.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to hear. And yeah, I think that's actually going to be like the first podcast episode that I upload for my podcast. And yeah, it's also pretty interesting to see like now everything really coming to fruition and really manifest itself, because like this podcast idea, it's been in my head for probably even 2 years.
Wow.
But I guess everything was in my head way earlier, because kind of the moment when I would say like discovered this path of, let's say, awakening or getting to know myself a little bit more. I don't know. I think I will also ask you this in a second, but for me, maybe it was just like naivete or just too much excitement. But like as soon as I kind of stepped on this, like I really just felt like, oh my God, I just need to share everything about this. I just need to talk
Mm.
about this. Even though, yeah, I was just a very bloody beginner, and I'm still, I mean, in a way, I guess we're all still beginners and we're learning all the time. And I don't know if there will be this defining point of enlightenment or something. Maybe not, but still, from what I've learned and from what I've heard and from what I get to know through other people, like, still never ends, even if you have maybe an extremely intense experience. So yeah, just cool that this is finally happening. And maybe just talk a little bit more about your cop career. Like, how did you come like to make that decision? Like, do you remember like your circumstances and where you were at in your life when you were thinking, okay, I want to do this thing as a police officer and work in this way? Yeah.
Sure. I had I'd been in the Coast Guard for 5 years. I got out. Um, I met my wife. We got married, and I was working in the private sector. I was doing scuba instruction on Maui, um, and I really loved that. It was a lot of fun, but it was hard to make ends meet. It was really not enough money coming in. Um, and I had grown up with my father being a police officer, and I had totally worshipped him. And he was my hero, and I just thought being a cop was the coolest thing in the world. But I personally didn't want to be a cop. I didn't I didn't find it appealing. But at that stage in my life, I found the desire for the benefits and stability and income of a career. It started to appeal to me, and I got a call from my dad who said, "Hey, they're building a new jail in this sheriff's department. They're going to be hiring a whole bunch of people. It's a really good time to come in and test, and you should give it a shot." So I did. I went to California and tested, and my younger brother tested with me. He had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. And so we ended up getting hired and going to the police academy together and working together for the bulk of our careers. So that was a kind of nice added benefit. I was really happy to be able to do that with him, and it made it more of a kind of childhood adventure, right? Me and my little brother playing cops and robbers. Um, it was a lot of fun. The early years were a lot of fun.
And then, yeah, how did you came to like or maybe dislike the job? Like, I guess it's also pretty intense, maybe. Like, I don't know what exactly you did, but uh, yeah, it's
Yeah, I definitely found it,
something.
and I found it really intense. At first, it was really intensely exciting and fun and challenging. Um, I wasn't a natural cop. I didn't have good cop instincts, really. I wasn't a tough guy. So I had to learn a lot. Had to learn how to be confrontational with people, how to exercise authority in a fair way without overdoing it or underdoing it. I basically had to reshape my entire persona, um, and I did it, and I loved it. I liked the job, and I liked those new aspects of my personality that sort of glommed onto me and that I cultivated. But after a number of years, the psychic toll of just swimming in garbage all the time, just always being there at somebody's worst moment of their life again and again and again and again and again. Even though where I worked, it was pretty low key. It wasn't, a tough inner city beat. There was not a
Hmm.
lot of violent crime. It was a bucolic, beautiful community. Um, but there was a rampant methamphetamine problem. There was all the human behavioral problems that come with being a human being. It's always present. So there was still plenty that challenged me and things that I saw and experienced that left deep psychic wounds um, in me. And I didn't have a way of dealing with that that was functional. I found a really effective way of dealing with it, which was alcohol. Like alcohol totally hooked me up.
Yeah.
At the end of a long day, I'd come home and, you know, pour a couple of stiff drinks and sit out on the back deck and smoke a cigar and drink a ice cold vodka, and I
Yeah.
felt wonderful. You know, I felt fully alive and capable of dealing with what I was dealing with and appreciative of the beauty of life. But um, my relationship with alcohol became pretty dysfunctional pretty quickly, and it became uh, its own set of problems. And I couldn't really find a way out for myself. And then at the same time, as my alcohol use increased, my job stress increased, then our teenage daughter started getting into drugs, and she became a methamphetamine addict and started
Wow.
getting arrested by guys that I was working with and fighting with guys that I was working with and running away from guys I was working with. And um, I was suddenly, you know, in this world where I was dealing with methamphetamine and meth addicts all day at work, and then dealing with the same thing at home, and trying to lubricate everything with as much vodka as I could tolerate. And surprisingly, I found myself really depressed and really unhappy and um, unable to cope with my feelings of just being emotionally overwhelmed and um, bitter, cynical, unhappy with the state of the human being as I experienced them. I just thought we were all terrible. And I was trying to do my best, but I was terrible too. And I recognized, like, I had a lot of suicidal ideation. Um, that to me just seemed like, well, that will totally solve the problem, right? All problems completely and permanently solved. But also, like, as a deputy sheriff, we worked as coroners. So I went to dozens and dozens and dozens of gunshot suicide scenes and cleaned up the aftermath and, you know, saw people.
You said you worked as a corners?
Yeah, as a coroner. So
What's that exactly?
that's when you have unattended death in the county, then coroner goes out and analyzes the scene and makes a determination as to the cause of death. So
Okay, okay, yeah,
if it's medical or if it's foul play, homicide, whatever. And
okay.
as a deputy sheriff, like, I wasn't doing autopsies and doing medical examiner stuff, but we would roll out to the scene and, you know, okay, there's a guy on the sofa, his brains are on the back wall, there's a gun in his lap, looks like a suicide, right? And we'd
Yeah.
write that up and send it off to the detectives or to the coroner for more follow up. But I guess the main thing was that I was in a lot of rooms with a lot of mostly men who had made that decision. And I was around to see the toll that it took on the family members. And so, as much as like I had this private fantasy of, oh, I could kill myself and it would all be over, I at the same time I had an absolutely firm backstop that I would not do that because I didn't want to leave that mess for my wife, for my daughter, for my brother, my family, my mom and dad. You know, there's a tremendous cost to taking your own life that is paid by the people who love and support you. So I thought about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, but at the same time, I knew that I wouldn't do it. However, I also recognized that I was armed 24 hours a day. And whenever I wasn't at work, I had a pretty good load on. So if you have alcohol and you have that really lowers your inhibitions and impulse control,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a loaded gun in your hand all the time. It's just, and you feel like oh God, I just wish I
Mm-hmm.
could kill myself. I recognized that that was not a good territory for me to be in. And even if I really, really, really didn't want to do it, I might. So I recognized that there was some danger, like serious danger. Um, and so then you think, well, mental health, I need to get with a therapist and get my mind right. But I knew too, like I was on the SWAT team, I was a detective, I was doing all the hard charging police work that I really loved and lived for. And they wouldn't let me keep doing that if I was seeing a shrink. I wouldn't be fit for duty. So it's not like they would have fired me or I would have lost my job, but I would have lost those
Mm-hmm.
assignments until I was better, till I was healthy again. So I wasn't going to do that. No way. um, but I had always read in Buddhist texts, for lay audiences, um, Pema Chodron and Chogyam Trungpa and um, Bob Thurman, a bunch of stuff that was always in my head. So I finally reached the point where I'm like, I need to get my head right. I can't rely on a therapist to do that for me. I need to get a meditation practice going, and I need to get with some people who understand the mind and emotions and how they work. And I'll just bootstrap myself. I'll just get in with them and learn how to sit, learn how to think, learn how to regulate my emotions. So I just Googled, looked for a Buddhist center, and I found a Tibetan Buddhist center near me and started my path right there. And of course, it wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be, and I didn't respond to it in the way that I thought that I would, but it was totally what I had been waiting for my whole life. And the beauty of entering the path through the gate of suffering is that, at least for me, I didn't care what they told me to do. I was going to do it if I thought that it would help. So, they say sit meditation. All right, I'm going to sit meditation. Read this book. All right, I'll read this book. Have you heard about the Nundra, the preliminary practices? No. Well, you should think about that. Okay, I'm going to do that. Whatever it was, I just did it. Oh, retreat. What's that? Okay, I'm going to book a retreat and go on retreat. And I just dove into it like somebody who was going to do that or die. And that's kind of how I felt. And, you know, like right away, I knew that I had found my home. As soon as I encountered my first teacher, I knew that there was something magical in that. And I felt that spark of being seen, being recognized, being accepted, um, and this hunger and insatiable curiosity for what that teacher had that radiated into the room and penetrated my heart and just blew me wide open. I mean, I'm here, I was a cop. I was not very woo woo spiritual, not very, you know, but yeah, I'll never forget that first encounter. And every step beyond that primary step was just more of the same for me. For some reason, I've been blessed with um, an abundance of teachers, an abundance of guides, uh, a lot of experiences and support, and very quickly rewired my entire psyche, my whole brain, all of my neurochemistry. Um, and I went from a deeply unhappy, deeply dysfunctional, flawed, and semi dangerous human being to, somebody who I hope embodies all the qualities of the Dharma. You know, I, I love, that's my primary obligation, my primary commitment to everything is to meet it with love and curiosity. And I do that like genuinely now. At first, I had to put on that persona, right? Try it on. They say, be
Uh,
nice. Okay, I'll try to be nice. Be loving. I'll try to be loving. But, eventually you stew in that long enough and um, it transforms you. if you give yourself over to that process. So I would say I'm thoroughly Xinjianged. I'm processed thoroughly by the Dharma, and have turned into, you know, what I to me it feels what I always should have been. Just a happy, living human being who's awake, who knows where he is, who looks for ways to connect with others and benefit others, and who feels like he just lives in a constant rain of blessings. So for me, it's been a pretty good trip.
Yeah, sounds like it. Maybe for people who are listening to this, could you maybe describe like some of those qualities? I mean, you did it already in some kind of way when you said like you were trying to live by the Dharma and everything that entails, but yeah, those teachers, like what exactly, I mean, I kind of know it because I also have found like a known teacher, but what is it that makes them so maybe even necessary, or yeah.
Well, I think for me, when we first encounter these beings, it's a revelation, right? If we're karmically ripe for that connection to be made, um, it's just like having an alien spaceship come down and some three-headed green monster come out. It shakes you to your core. It reorganizes your entire worldview. Um, and yeah, they are necessary, right? Because we live in this world that is completely conditioned by ignorance and attachment and aversion. So everyone in our society, everyone that we connect with, everyone that we look to for guidance and help, um, they're just as confused as we are. And so they may have some techniques to help mitigate that, but they don't really have a foundational understanding of what
Mhm.
is what sets all of that suffering into motion. And the the people who have encountered the Dharma and opened themselves up to it and practiced it and realized it in their own mind stream, they're like someone who can see in a world full of blind people, and you can follow them, right? And they can teach
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
how to see. Um, and at first, I think it's easy to think that the qualities that these teachers possess is somehow intrinsic to them, like it's that man or it's that woman. Um, and in my experience, that's kind of misreading what's going on, because it's really the truth that is shining from these people. It's the truth of the Dharma. It's the truth of how things really are. And they make of themselves a suitable receptacle and vessel for that truth. And they're not driving that bus at all, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the genuine teachers, they're not talking about themselves. They're talking about the truth, the light, love, all of these foundational qualities. Of course, though, there is a personal aspect to it, right? Because although they are this container for this limitless, foundational, unchanging field of bliss and compassion and awareness, they do color it with their own karmic traces. So this teacher is not the same as this other teacher, even though they have that foundational base.
Yeah.
Their unique karma gives a unique flavor to their teachings and to their way of being in the world. And that's why it can be important for us to look around until we find someone with whom we really do share a karmic connection, um, because they can make that access to the truth much easier for us and catalyze that potentiality that we all carry more rapidly just because of the karmic connection.
Yeah.
But the world seems to be full of them. They're everywhere. You can't swing a dead cat without running into some of these people. And, they're not all obvious teachers. They're hidden everywhere, but we all know them when we see them. You encounter somebody and you're just like,
Yeah.
something's going on with that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few times like those karmic connections, and I just think the way I understand karmic connections or karma in general, it's just basically the accumulation of everything you did, everything you were thinking, which then results in what you're doing. And yeah, basically your the thing you get like in a restaurant, like when you pay the receipt.
Yeah, the check.
Yeah, the check. It's basically your check, like from everything just accumulated to this one thing. But how would you describe karma, or what is it? Like, how did you come to understand it? Because it's a
Yeah.
very big word, like in the spiritual realm or in Buddhism, Hinduism.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I think as our capacity for wisdom grows as we progress as practitioners, our understanding deepens and broadens. So I probably have a tiny little childlike understanding of karma compared to people who really get it. But the way that I look at it is that it's cause and effect. It's the result, as you said, of all the prior um, thoughts and deeds and speech, everything that we have done and thought and said and dreamed of and daydreamed of, and not just for this life, but for, if you believe in rebirth, for limitless lifetimes. So, we're taught that cause and effect is the foundational truth of the reality that we live in. Whatever you do is going to have an effect. And so if you commit a negative act, it's going to have a negative consequence. That karma will ripen. And there's nothing that anyone can do to prevent that karma from ripening. But how that karma ripens is so mysterious and so unpredictable. It rarely ripens within the same lifetime. So we're constantly having karmic ripenings from seeds that were planted in the far distant past. And we can't really tease out what we might have done to have generated this fruit. And that can be kind of a scary way of looking at the world and looking at our experience, right? It's like, oh, we're already screwed. I did terrible things for a million lifetimes in the past, and now I'm stuck with the consequences. But what we learn through practice is that there is some wiggle room in how we can help our karmas to ripen, how we can stop accumulating so much negative karma, start accumulating more positive karma, and utilizing our intrinsic suffering to ripen as much karma as possible, as much negative karma as possible now, while the karmic seeds are still very small. If we can bring our attention to that, we can ripen vast quantities of negative karma before they grow out of control and super powerful. But the short answer is I don't really know, right? It's beyond my ability to understand. But I do accept that, you know, it's real. What I and how that works in my mind and my heart is that I take responsibility for every thought. I take responsibility for every word. I take responsibility for every action that I do or that I fail to do, right? So I think before I met the Dharma, I really thought that I was like this besieged character in a very threatening environment, and that I had to do everything in my power to protect myself from a dangerous world that was full of demons and evil people and criminals and, you know, just danger everywhere. And that I had to put up these walls between myself and the world to keep all of that negativity out. But when we really understand karma and how it works, we realize that everything out there is just a mirror of what's inside of us, and that every negative thing that we encounter comes from our own actions, our own thoughts. Then suddenly we may still live in a dangerous environment, but we have all of the power, right? It's up to us. Um, of course, that comes with the bitter pill that we have to actually change, right? We cannot continue in the way that we were living before. We actually have to change. We can't just think about it or read about it or talk to other people about it or make plans about it. We have to actually change our actions, change our thinking, change our speech. And that can be a long and arduous process. But that's another thing where I think Buddhism is so skillful, because they give us a ton of tools how to do that directly. You know, here's how to work with anger. Here's how to work with lust. Here's how to work with loneliness. Here's how to work with, greed. Everything. There's an antidote for every experience that we have, and a way to work skillfully with whatever experience arises. And I think that's something that is really lacking, at least in my experience, in the Christian traditions,
Yeah.
right? It's like love God, love Christ, love your neighbors, and as long as you accept Christ as your personal savior, then you get a ticket to heaven. But there's nothing about, like, how do I work with these feelings? How do I fix my broken mind, um, other than just put it in God's hands and pray, which is
Mhm.
great and can be very profoundly helpful and can
Yeah.
actually work.
Yeah.
But I really like the Buddhist approach of, getting down to the nuts and bolts and saying, well, until whatever occurs, you're like this right now. So right now, here's some medicine that you can take, and take it as it's directed, and you will get the result. And boy, you do that a few times and you start to really feel that sense of devotion and appreciation for the path just blossom and grow.
Yeah. I also was just thinking a little bit about Christianity before you even mention it, and like how they relate to each other. And I mean, also for your path or for your journey and for mine as well. It's just interesting that we kind of live in this, yeah, in the Western world, and then we kind of find these Eastern traditions and everything. And also, maybe you can also talk a little bit how that was for you. But when I grew up, especially as a teenager, like I really had such a disdain and maybe even hate for Christianity. Um, because I was just thinking, yeah, you're just making it so easy for yourself. There's this God and he's, I don't know, omnipotent and blah, blah, blah. But have you ever thought about that logically? That doesn't even make sense. um, like, I was like that as a teenager. Now I look at it also differently. And I also look very differently at someone, for example, like Jesus. And I also saw that you posted some pictures from him.
Yeah.
Always like, I don't know, with this hand sign and the heart, and heart's just shining outwards. But yeah, then also eventually when I disregarded Christianity and religion, but then I saw, okay, but I still have no idea what's going on and I don't understand anything either. So they might as well be right or something. At least they have an approach. But yeah, then I also very much resonated with Buddhism because it's so clear cut in a way, or so personal and direct. Yeah. So did you try Christianity in a way, or was it like always like, okay, I will just go try Buddhism, and then afterwards you maybe kind of gained a different understanding of Christianity, or how did that work out for you?
Sure. I actually began with Christianity. So I remember being 4 years old, maybe not quite 5, and watching a television evangelist on Sunday
Oh.
morning, you know, praise the Lord and come down and be saved. And I remember watching that and just feeling like, oh, I want to give my heart to Jesus. I want to be saved. I want this connection. And it was a profound moment that
Okay.
stays in my heart and in my mind. Um, so whatever that seed was, it was planted very early. And it was a genuine longing for, you know, a connection with Christ and that power of ultimate love and compassion and forgiveness. Um, but I wasn't in a very religious household. I think my grandmother I used to visit in the summer, and she would put me into vacation Bible school and make sure that I went to Baptist church every Sunday. But most of the time, we didn't go to church. My mother occasionally went to church and took us. But I think as a teenager, I started to get more into it. And I really dove in to reading the Bible and studying and wanting to develop that connection and wanting to be a Christian, whatever that was. But, you know, 16 years old, I was a very rigid thinker. I didn't have a lot of experience. And so I didn't know how to hold the aspects of Christianity that I think are valuable, the the truth and the light that gave rise to that religion, I think is a real force in the world. Um, but all I could see were the contradictions and the the meanness of spirit of people who called themselves Christian. Like in my experience, I didn't see people behaving like Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I saw people judging and, you know, hiding from others and protecting themselves from others and reinforcing their beliefs and reinforcing their culture in a way that I thought was too easy, right? You don't you don't have to do anything except say you're sorry to mom and dad, like, and then you get this golden ticket ride to heaven. But you can just keep being the screwed up human being that you are every day of your life. But if you say the magic words, you know, you get the golden ticket. So I turned away from Christianity as a teenager and, became kind of a hardcore atheist and science-based, rigorous, just look at the
Mm-hmm.
world as it is. And I don't need fairy tales for children. And I don't need, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and Jesus and God up in heaven. Yeah, I totally turned away from that. And at the same time, I was living in Taiwan. I finished up my high school years in Taiwan. And so I got my first exposure to meditation and to Buddhist teachings there. And although I didn't become a practitioner, I definitely felt, oh, that's different. Like those guys, they make sense. They're logically consistent. They're, you know, hardcore reality based, but still, you know, connected to the sense of love and this um, mission of understanding reality at the most fundamental level and then operating from that understanding. I just thought it was unique. You know, in my experience, I didn't see other human beings as being interested in that. But then it took, you know, it took growing up and accumulating enough suffering,
Hmm.
enough stress, enough garbage to sort of compress my psyche into a space where I was willing to jump into practice, actual practice. And that's what makes the difference, right? You can have all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
ideas about, oh, I agree with that, I disagree with that, that's cool, that's not cool, these people are right, these people are wrong. Um, but in my experience, it's time on the cushion. It's working with the mind directly and the emotions directly, and it's working under the supervision of a teacher who has completed that path already, that allows you to get in there and rearrange everything so that you start to understand what you're doing, understand reality itself, and then you can relate to reality in a way more skillful way once you understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's also something in general, like I saw or I see in Christianity, like also here in Germany. It's like you go to church and then they have like all the stories from the Bible and they read them, and sometimes they're beautiful stories, sometimes they're a little bit weird, but they all try like to convey a message. And then they say, yeah, if we just think about ourselves as if we were like one of those people, then I don't know, we can live our life more skillfully and more joyfully. But there's not enough like direct attention or insistence of like, yeah, practice. I mean,
Yeah.
praying is somehow there, but
They don't even teach you how to pray.
yeah, that's also what I was just thinking about. Like, I think I never heard that in a church, that they were like, okay, now you go home and you sit down and then you do this or that. It's like, I don't know, pray to God, keep God in your mind, and so vague. It's like, yeah, what do I do with it? It's, yeah.
Yeah, I feel tremendously sorry for those people who are seekers like us, but who find themselves limited to only being able to explore the traditional Christian way of engaging with the spiritual life, um, because it's up to them as individuals. There really is, you know, there's the guidance of Scripture, and there's the guidance of whatever pastor, preacher, priest that you have, but it's kind of a crapshoot. And I think I'm just so grateful to have made the connection with Buddhism, where um, it's great if you have these connections. It's great if you meet this one person who can unlock your heart and open everything up. But even if you don't, here's here's a book. Do these 10 things, you know, and do them 100,000 times. Do them over and over and over and over and over again. And then check the results, and then change if you're not getting the correct result. You know, it's a total scientific method of how to rewire your brain and your consciousness. And, you know, I think in the Christian contemplative tradition, there is some more meat on the bones there. Um,
Yeah.
but how do you find out about that? Like, they don't talk about the Christian contemplative tradition in church,
Mm.
right? You have to be a student of philosophy or a student of religion to encounter those names and those beings. And they get it. They do the work and they get the
Totally.
result, and there's no question in my mind that they totally 100% are doing the same thing. Different language, different um, conceptual frameworks, but the result I think is the same. And when you read the Christian mystics, it's just like reading a great Zen master. So yeah, I think Christianity in that way is very impoverished and um, underdeveloped in its technical how-to abilities, regardless of the truth of their message. They just don't have
Yeah.
a very good educational system. And
Mm.
I think in a way it's geared towards, you know, illiterate peasants from 1500 years ago. Like, we'll just tell you what to do. You come here, give us some of your money. We'll give you a
Yeah.
blessing. You know, don't worry about it. And for a lot of people, that's fine. But for the real seekers, the people who are really looking, I think, and I see this a lot in people who are going through the deconstruction of their Christianity. The people who go through deconstruction are the most committed and intense Christians. They're not lukewarm. These are people who are really about it, and they find, to their horror and dismay, that their chosen path and chosen system has all of these problems, and they have to go through the hard work of looking at that with fresh eyes and throwing away what's unskillful and what doesn't work, and then looking outside of their tradition for those particular nuts and bolts things, like how to do centering prayer, how to do meditation, how to work with the mind. Yeah, so we're very lucky, those of us who've stumbled onto the Buddhist path, because there's just so much help for the early stages of how to come out of that initial state of confusion and despair.
While we're on the topic of churches, you also mentioned this at the beginning, but let's talk a little bit about the Santo Daime church that
Sure.
you visited or attended to, and also their use of ayahuasca, and like that's also very interesting, and that's also something I haven't seen in Christianity really.
Mm,
Although it's interesting that there are a lot of like ancient pictures and symbols of angels and saints, and there are a lot of them who actually entail mushrooms in those pictures.
right.
Um, but yeah, nowadays it's not really something that's frowned upon in church or something. The only thing I really see is sometimes they use this smoke. I don't know
Yeah,
exactly
the
how you call it.
incense.
Yeah, incense. But it kind of stops there. And I
Yeah.
don't know, incense, maybe they get you into a certain mood, but it's not really anything like psychedelics. So yeah, how did you stumble upon that church? And then how were those experiences, if you had any, with the actual ayahuasca and everything?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of a long story, but um,
I'm here for it.
after I had encountered the Buddhist teachings and really gotten 4 or 5 years of practice under my belt and was really committed, I was all about it. I was still a cop. My daughter was still total smoking drug addict and in and out of jail, and a disaster. Um, I was looking for an alternative addiction treatment that I might be able to help her with, because
Hmm.
she's just not about the traditional. As soon as you put her in placement, she ran. She's not about that. Um, and since she was I had heard a lot about ayahuasca being used to help combat drug addiction, but I also knew that she was a felon with a record, so she couldn't really use illegal drugs to do that. That would have just been a trip back to prison for her. Um, but there was this other substance, Kambo. Have you ever heard of it? It's a frog secretion. Um,
Um, like I know about 5-MeO DMT, which
okay,
is
so
also
this
from a
is
frog, but
right. This is something different. It's not
okay,
psychoactive.
okay.
Um, it's basically causes purging, makes you throw up,
Oh.
and um, you burn little holes in your skin with a head of a match or a piece of incense, and then you put this frog secretion on your skin on the burn holes, and then it very quickly enters your lymphatic system and floods you with all these peptides that result in making you vomit. And you vomit for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then you take the secretions off and you rest. So no big deal, right? It's pretty weird. Why would anyone want to do that? It sounds horrific. I hate vomiting. Um, but I, as I started looking into it, I was just seeing story after story after story of people who took this frog medicine and quit smoking and quit using heroin and quit
Oh
using
wow.
methamphetamine and um, started not only jettisoning all of the negative things in their lives, but suddenly doors were opening for them in positive development areas as well. Um, and it just really intrigued me. And I chalk it up now to some kind of karmic connection. It doesn't make sense
Mm-hmm.
why I would pursue this frog medicine thing, but as soon as I heard about it, I was like, I want to do this frog medicine, see if it's any good. Maybe it'll help me, but I bet that it will help my kid. And if
Mm-hmm.
I know about it, I can talk to her about it and she can try it and maybe it'll help her, right? It can't hurt. So I went and I found somebody who was giving it. I took it. I threw up. I passed out. I went back for another session the following week and another one the week after that because you're supposed to get 3 treatments within a lunar calendar to have the full treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, when I took that first treatment, as soon as he put the medicine on, I could feel it go into my body. And I had this uh, total conviction. I've just killed myself. I am going to die. It was so powerful. It was the most toxic and alarming. My whole body, every cell in my body was just like, "Oh, you fucked up. We're we're not going to recover from this." And it started vomiting explosively. But and I lost consciousness. But coming out of that, I just felt euphoric and happy and warm and loved and centered. Um, the traditional kind of psychedelic experience,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
aftermath, that kind of opening, and
Yeah.
everything seems so fresh and full of potential. And um, I never had a drink of alcohol after that first treatment.
Wow. And that's when
Just,
you were still in your
yeah.
drinking
Oh,
every
totally.
evening.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had tried to quit many, many, many times and I just wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And it was like in that session, that frog like appeared to me. Like there was a sense, I didn't see anyone, but
Mm-hmm.
I had this very powerful sense of presence. And this guide just saying, I'm taking that out of your life. That's done. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And it was as easy as that. I had no cravings. I had no problem. I could be around people who were drinking. I could have alcohol in the house. And it was just It was just like that door had been closed for me. So then that really freaked me out. I was like, okay, there's something going on with this. So I decided to take this training to become a practitioner, and I went up to a training course up on the Canadian border and spent 2 weeks learning how to give Kambo and working with others, and it was a very intensive uh, training, and it had very little to do with the medicine. It was mostly about, I don't know, breaking us open. They were very skillful. It was very strange. But I met someone there while I was doing the training who told me about the Santo Daime church and using ayahuasca as a sacrament. And that was it was like, okay, the whole reason I made this connection to Kambo was so I could meet this guy and he could tell me
Mhm.
about this church. Because very early on, maybe 15 or 20 years before that, I had made a connection with the Santeria church. So, kind of voodoo, Santeria, Espiritismo. Um, and it didn't last. I was only connected to that spiritual family for maybe a year, but it definitely planted some seeds. So when my friend was telling me about this church, he's like, oh, it's the same kind of thing. It's this Afro-Caribbean Christian and um, you know, indigenous systems working together with the use of this ayahuasca as a sacrament. And he told me, like, most people who want to use ayahuasca are not going to be interested in the church aspect of the Santo Daime. And he told me about it, and it sounded crazy, right? Yeah, everybody wears all white or blue and white. The men and the women are kept separate.
Oh
You have
wow.
to sing and dance in this regimented way um, for hours and hours and hours and hours. It's not like, you know, drop a couple of hits of acid and lay on your sofa and listen to psychedelic music and have your trip, right? It's this whole other thing. And for some reason, that totally intrigued me. So after the training, I went to his church with him, and it was just like meeting my teacher in Tibetan Buddhism. There was no question in anywhere in my body or my mind or my psyche that I was in the presence of something profound and loving and really interested in my development and my growth. And again, sort of like Tibetan Buddhism, there was this structure where these people were working with this energy and they were doing it in a very intentional way, and it was dialed in, and they had their shit wired. It's like, you know, here's all the buckets, here's people to watch and make sure that no one wanders away. Here's someone to, support you if it's too powerful, um, you know, so that they can keep the pure, clean energy going. And that's part of why they separate the sexes. So there's no, you know, contamination of that energy with interpersonal sexuality.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
just, we're doing the spiritual thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that opened up a whole world that was not, I can't even say it's missing in the Tibetan Buddhist approach, because it isn't. It's similar. It's just dressed in different guises. But it was something that was really necessary for my development, I'm sure, to get me into my body and out of my head. And it really, working with ayahuasca and the Santo Daime, really brought home to me how precious our planet is, you know, Mother Earth. Like,
Mhm.
really, she really is our mother in the most literal way. And we have this obligation to treat her well and to love her in return. And that's something that I never felt. I had never just had that personal feeling of like, oh my God, this is my mom. I love her. I'm so sorry that we've done all this terrible stuff to you. And I became like actually interested in taking care of the planet and mitigating the damage that we do. And I guess seeing everything that we were doing from a more bird's eye perspective, from a larger perspective, a planetary and interplanetary and galactic, um, multiple lifetimes, just a much bigger
Yeah.
lens from which
Yeah.
to see everything. Um, and so for me, like, that was really hard to bring plant medicine into the path and to do this work with the Santo Daime as a really committed Tibetan Buddhist, because there's not a lot of support for working with psychedelics in the Tibetan Buddhist community. And I went to my teachers and I said, hey, I'm going to do this. I did this. This is what I did. This is what happened. And I'm going to do more of it. And I'm going to keep going. And I want your blessing and I want your input and, tell me what you think. And my primary teacher was like, go ahead, but it's not going to end well. And there's all these dangers. And she really laid it out for me in a really clear way, what the spiritual and psychic dangers are associated with working with these powerful medicines. And I was like, okay, I'm still going to do it. And I went and I did it. And after I've been doing it for about a year, I was on retreat with her. And so I was able to talk to her about the experiences and about what was going on. And after she listened to me, she's like, okay, I get it. This is, she said, it's an emanation of Chenrezi, Avalokiteshvara, that is working through this medicine with you. But it's totally in alignment with everything that we're doing. It's obviously necessary for you and good for you, so keep going. So then I was like, woo, I can keep going. And yeah, I think with COVID, I had to stop going to church. And it's starting to pick up now again, but I haven't rejoined, but I definitely feel the call. I want to get back to that a lot. It's so different from anything that I've ever experienced, but really, really beneficial for me it was.
And when you do it or when they do it in that setting, like, do you just get a full-blown trip, or is it like also 5, 6, 7 days and then you do little doses again and again, or how exactly?
Well, for me, I'm very sensitive to ayahuasca, so I'm definitely tripping balls the whole time. And we'll usually take the first dose at the beginning of the ceremony, and then every hour or 2 hours we'll take another dose, and we'll do that 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 times, depending on how long the ceremony is and what's going on. And that's a very challenging medicine to work with. Like, physiologically, it just wrecks me. It makes you very nauseous. There's a lot of vomiting. Um, it's hard on the body. And for me, it's really hard on my psyche. I find it terribly uncomfortable, and very challenging to deal with. It's like this crushing sense of fatigue and complete disorientation. And it's like I'm like a raw nerve. I have no protection from the onslaught of what's going on. But eventually, I learned how to communicate with the spirit of ayahuasca, and she would respond to me. Like, I could say, okay, I'm here. I'm fully committed to this. I want what you have to give me. I'm ready for my lesson. Yes, yes, yes. However, could you please dial this aspect down a little bit so that I can be present for it? And then, boom, it would just go right down.
No.
And then, sometimes she would say, no, you need this. And then she would totally kick my ass. But like, for me, I guess one of the hallmarks of my spiritual path is that I want the woo. I want to be connected to these great beings, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
see Christ and be with Christ, and I want to be with God, and I want to be in the light. And ayahuasca gave me the opportunity to spend lots and lots of flight time in that environment and to learn about it and to get steeped in it and to have it uh, change me in the ways that it wanted to change me. So yeah, I sort of viewed it as a master class in waking up. And I know it's not for everyone, and it's certainly not necessary. And there are plenty of people who do a lot of ayahuasca who don't get that kind of benefit from it. But I can, only speak to my experience, and for me, it has been foundational. Um, and it's been interesting to note for the last 2 years not being able to do it, how present it still is in my life and in my mind stream. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, um, I think all that work that I did in Tibetan Buddhism to connect to the guru and devotional practices and to recognize the inner guru allowed me to sort of build this inner assembly of gods and deities and guides who live in my mind stream and
Mm-hmm.
teach me and support me and help me. It probably sounds completely insane, but they're there. They're in my
Yeah,
mind and they're available
yeah.
to me, and I can call on them and talk to them and receive support from them. And ayahuasca is definitely right there with it. And she also brings, like within that setting of the Santo Daime, there's a lot of mediumship. So you're working with um, spirits of the dead and
Wow.
spirits of other realms, and they make themselves known. And that's a lot, that's really fascinating, but it's a lot more dangerous too, because they're not just a benevolent force.
Mm-hmm.
They're like human beings in a way. They have a lot of mixed qualities. And if you're opening yourself up to channel and let them move through you and speak through you and utilize you as a vessel, um, you have to be really careful because they don't always have your best interests at heart. So that's a whole other aspect of the path. And I don't think that's for everybody, and it's not for most spiritual seekers, but it is an aspect of the Santo Daime that was foundational for me. Like it was a big part of it, and it helped me like open up, I think, more to the Tibetan cosmology and worldview, that there really are all these other realms. There really are all these other kinds of beings. The the world that's represented to us by our senses is just this tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of
Yeah.
of the full expression of reality. Um, yeah, so I was happy to have my blinders taken off through those experiences and get a deep immersion into aspects of reality that were not available to me in other ways. And it opened my heart, you know, it totally opened my heart and changed how I relate to myself and how I relate to others profoundly. It's been a great blessing for me.
I think reading about DMT, which is like the main component in ayahuasca, I think I first read about it when I was like 14 or 15. I think I was 15. And that was during the time where I like had this disdain for church, and I also like identified myself as an atheist. But I read those stories from people tripping, and somehow I just like couldn't dismiss what they were saying and what they were talking about. And some of those stories were also similar to what you were just talking about. And they were just these people talking about that they met entities and spirits and beings in other realms who seemed even more intelligent and real and there than anything like they seen before.
Yeah.
And it's not just like one guy on the internet just talking shit out of his ass. Like, there's so many people and so many different traditions around the world who had these ceremonies, who made those connections, and like all the shamanism and so much stuff that I really was so fascinated by that. And then I went to my biology teacher and I asked him, like, yeah, do you have DMT maybe somewhere in the lab or something? And he was, no, what is it? And then I just printed like a page and gave it to him. It was like more of a scientific explanation. There were not many stories about crazy things, so to speak. But I think he also talked with my mother, and he was like, oh yeah, he's so interested, and he's like also doing stuff on his own and bringing it in. And I was like, huh, yeah, kind of. Yeah, but that kind of imprinted like this interest or this longing or this openness about psychedelics just inside of me. And I didn't really, I mean, I tried DMT, but I never had like a real breakthrough experiences. And that's also something else I wanted to talk about. Like, I could have had breakthrough experiences if I wanted to, but I guess it was also just like not the right time.
Mm.
And I had like one kind of intense experience with DMT, but it also wasn't a breakthrough. And breakthrough, for those who are listening, it's just like you have like normal experiences, or not normal experiences, but like very subtle experiences for like what you see, like you have hallucinations and everything's like a little bit different. But those breakthrough experiences are when you feel like you're in a different realm or a different dimension and everything's just totally different and you're out of your body and that kind of stuff. But I had like the slight experience, and there was like a tree in front of me, and something kind of told me to focus on the tree. And it was very apparent to me that there was something like, okay, here's this tree, just let yourself fall into it, look at it, be guided by it. And it was crazy because at some time there was just a trunk and everything else just shifted. And there was, I really should know this name of this physical or of this object or this energy stream. It's basically just a stream of energy, and it starts in the middle and goes up and goes like outside and comes down and goes in the middle
Is that the
again. Like,
torus?
maybe, like, basically looks like two circles, and the circles, they meet at one point and then they just circulating. But I was really not able like to let myself go into the experiences, and I was kind of fearful and just stuck in my head and everything. And then something in that experience just told me, okay, just go the natural way, just do your practice, and it was just like an intuitive message I got, but I really understood it, and I really got the point. But yeah, what I also wanted to say, like, it's so sad kind of, and now it's kind of coming back into our society or in mainstream society, that there are these like tiny churches and indigenous churches who can offer you experience like that. But like me as a teenager, or here in Berlin or in Germany or anywhere around the world, like, you can get those substances somehow, but it's more difficult to get like experienced teachers and beings and guides who can really go with you through that experiences.
Yeah.
Or through those experiences. So also some of those experiences I had with LSD and mushrooms, they were great in some regards and very rich, and they taught me a lot, but they were also sometimes just very horrible because I just got thrown into something that I didn't know how to control or deal with or just dose properly. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame that we don't have a structure in place to allow people to make contact with these medicines and do it in a safe way with experienced guides. You know, all this governmental structural fear around these substances. And yeah, that you have to respect them. They can be dangerous. They can cause harm
100%.
if
Yeah.
they're used unskillfully. And sometimes they can cause harm even if it's done right with a guide and with, support. That's not something to be trifled with. But for those of us who hear about them and it opens some door in our minds and we're intrigued and we want to go go explore that space, it does seem terrible that we don't have avenues to let that happen, to support that, because it can be so beneficial. It can be so life-changing. And I think, what you were describing, that intuitive message that you received, right? Like there's a quality within the psychedelic space of ayahuasca, especially, where you can know, okay, I'm totally hallucinating. This is moving, these colors, I'm seeing all of this, I'm seeing things that aren't here. But it doesn't make you lose your ability to reason. It doesn't impair your awareness at all. And so when you're in the midst of this, you can say, okay, this is an aspect of the psychedelic experience. But then there's this other thing, this information transmission, this connection where you hear some guidance, right? And it's just utterly clear. It doesn't come through any channel that you're familiar with, but it's present. There's no confusion associated with it. And it doesn't seem to be an aspect of the psychedelic thing. It's not like a hallucination. It's not an auditory hallucination. It's a sense of guidance. And you can differentiate that because you can say, oh, yeah, see the way that plant is moving and turning colors? That's a hallucination, right? There's no importance to that. It's beautiful or it's not beautiful. It's scary or it's appealing. But this other channel has that quality of being more real than everything that preceded it, right? More real than our ordinary waking consciousness. And the information, the support that you get, like, oh, you can just, here's the lesson for you. Look at this tree, dive into it, open up to it. You could only go so far, and it recognized that and said, okay, for you, go back to your practices and do this. I mean, that's beautiful advice. That's a skilled being that's working with you that can understand your potential, understand where you are, and is interested in your development, is interested in your well-being. And that's the sense that I get profoundly from ayahuasca, is that she wants us to wake up and to open our hearts so that we can live in harmony with each other and with her planet. There's no agenda other than that. It's like, hey, you guys are really sick. You're really confused and it's terrible, but it doesn't make you bad. You're not evil people, but you know, here's a way to open your heart. Here's a way to open your eyes. Here's a way to see beyond what you've normally seen and to make connections to a much broader family um, than what you might conceive of traditionally as your family. So I think there's definitely, I regard the teacher in that ayahuasca as profoundly as my teacher as any other human teacher.
Yeah. Let's go to a little bit different topic. maybe it's different, maybe it's not so different. What about Jiu-Jitsu martial arts?
Mm.
When have you discovered them? And how do they relate to practice, to your teachings, maybe? Do you relate to your Jiu-Jitsu teachers like you relate to your maybe Buddhist teachers? Yeah. What
Yeah,
is it about?
I was first exposed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the police academy.
Hmm.
So we got a little bit of exposure to Jiu-Jitsu there, and I loved it. I was intrigued by it. I thought it was really interesting, but I did not commit to it as a practitioner. Um, I didn't feel like I had the time that it required, that it asked of me, but I was also lazy and focused on other things. Um, so it wasn't until I retired and moved here that I was in a stable place where I could go to a dojo reliably, time and time and time again, that I made the connection. And yeah, it's for me, it's very much a spiritual, it's an outgrowth of my whole spiritual path. And I feel like, I got to Tibetan Buddhism, I got into the Santo Daime, and then Jiu-Jitsu appeared as the third step in that um, journey of almost like a return to the world, right? So
Hmm.
first we
Hmm.
have to leave the world. The world is disgusting and terrible and horrible, and we ache to escape from it, and we make that escape. We transcend samsara, and we wake up to the nature of mind and to the bliss that's inherent in existence. And once we've made that strong connection, or for me anyway, um, I needed to be returned to the earth. And I think that's what the Santo Daime did for me, is brought me into connection with the earth as an extension of my physical body, as an extension of my spiritual body, as my subtle body, as my home. Um, and then jujitsu was just like, yeah, move into your body fully. Learn to really love your body. Learn to really test your body and see the connection between the mind and the body. In jujitsu, it has the benefit, sort of like psychedelics and sort of like Kambo, of you're compressing everything.
Mm.
You're being crushed by a human being who knows more than you do, is stronger than you, is in better shape than you, and knows the techniques better than you. Um, and you're trying to breathe, maintain your sanity, figure out what is being done to you, figure out how to avoid that and counter it with something else, um, and not lose your shit. And then for me, there's the additional interest. There's always that spiritual channel of like, what's my awareness like? What happens to the quality of my awareness when I can't breathe, and when somebody's choking me, and when somebody's being violent towards me, um, or when I'm doing the same to them? Like,
Hmm.
is there a dichotomy? Is there a union? Is there overlap? And all of the juice of jujitsu, and I'm speaking as a beginner, right? I'm
Hmm.
not well
Hmm.
trained. I don't have expertise. I'm a raw beginner. But as a beginner, I'm swimming in a world that's completely unfamiliar to me. Um, but it feels just like getting into Tibetan Buddhism or getting into the Daime. It's a whole world. It's evidence-based, evidence-driven. It's empirical. There's no dishonesty. There's no chance to hide. That you are fully exposed, and who you are is revealed to yourself and to your training partners and to your coach. Um, and everyone is like that. So the beautiful thing I think in jujitsu is being around people who are willing to be crushed, who are willing to test their body and be friendly about it, happy about it. Like they're not aggro, they're not
Mhm.
full of rage. They're just like, oh, I'm going to pull your head off now. And now I'm going to twist your knee in the other direction. And isn't this fun? Um, there are people who are comfortable with discomfort. And I think that's a hallmark of a practitioner, right? In Zen Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, we
Mhm.
become more comfortable with our discomfort. We hold space for that and we explore that as the ground of richness and blessings and strength. And I think jujitsu is exactly the same. It it hones us. It draws out the best in us. Um,
I think I will quickly need to change the battery of my camera.
oh, okay.
Um, but
Yeah, you're
yeah,
frozen.
yeah. So I
I'll
can
hold
click
that thought.
pause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can click pause on. So we were just at the discomfort actually of yeah, people who train jiu-jitsu and practitioners, and yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously everyone who does jujitsu is not in it for the spiritual benefit of it. Um, but I think plenty of people are. But it's such a beautiful art, and the people who engage with it, because it's challenging, right? There's no easy day in jujitsu. There's no easy minute in jujitsu. Um, but they, they have this kind of inner light that comes from being willing to test themselves day in and day out and be themselves utterly on the mat. Appeared at a time in my own spiritual development where I really needed to get back to the marketplace, back into the body, return to the world. And it's been a great gift for me in that way. Um, it's it's so physical, it's so direct, it's so in the moment. And just like with Buddhism, um, it's a martial art that is heavy on specifics. It's heavy on technique, and it really is based on always working with live opposition to everything that you're
Mhm.
doing. So instead of practicing a kata and learning a form um, in empty space and getting the movements down, you're always working with the friction of an opposing will, an opposing will. And in my case, it's always an opposing will of somebody that's stronger and better trained than I am and knows what I'm trying to do and knows how to stop me. Um, so it's a great challenge, and like every great challenge, it just fuels the sense of happiness and joy um, because you're living this fully engaged experience. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like at every step of my journey, the world has just opened up and given me exactly what I needed for the next step. I'm a lucky guy.
Beautiful. Um, I don't know how closely related they are, but I guess they're somewhat related, and that is martial arts and masculinity.
Mm,
um, how do you understand masculinity? Do you understand masculinity? How did you maybe experience that in your journey? And like also maybe in those different aspects of Buddhism, psychedelics, jiu-jitsu, but also generally life, and maybe also an area of sexuality, and just maybe also masculinity just being this one force that exists in the world. Um, can you maybe,
sure.
yeah.
Um, I can. I guess for me, it's a big part of my self-image. It's a big part of my uh, desire to understand myself and the world in which I move. I'm a man. I'm a male. I'm fully identified with that way of being in the world. Um, it's foundational to how I move in the world. And I've had
Mm-hmm.
some experiences um, on the spiritual path where I've been exposed to not being a man, like taking on the identity of the female divine and being
Mm-hmm.
immersed in that and seeing the difference, the qualitative difference between that male way of expressing reality and the female way. So I know that it's not everyone's experience. And of course, masculinity is this huge field. There's a million different ways to be genuinely masculine. Um,
Yeah.
but for me, it's tied up in this identity as an American, as a white man, as a cop, as a cowboy, as a, fighter. Um, there's just it's everywhere. And although I think a large part of it too is my hero worship with my father, him being a cop and, this larger than life uh, example for me to follow after and how he expressed his masculinity. Um, and my relationship with my brother, the same kind of thing. I have a lot of really good positive male role models. And it's always been important to me to be a good man, to be a capable man, to be someone who was brave and courageous and strong and capable and could fix things and just do all the male stuff. But I'm also like really sensitive. I have a lot of feminine qualities. I'm very open-hearted. I I don't I think I have a lot of softness, a lot of flexibility, a lot of ability to include other points of view in the way that I see the world. And, um, you know, I like consensus building and I like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those feminine aspects. And, you have to just be completely mentally ill not to see the toxicity of masculinity as it is expressed in our society, right? If
Yeah.
I mean, all of the mass shootings, they're almost all men. I mean, there's a very rare exceptions, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a male, that's a masculine dysfunction. Um, war, uh, rape, interpersonal violence is the expression of this masculine identity gone wrong, I think, in most cases.
Yeah.
Um, and that sort of domineering way of relating to the world as something to be conquered and the way of seeing the world as a source of resources that need to be extracted from the environment so that I can accumulate wealth and power and wield that
Yeah.
over others. Um, so there's a definite sense that I carry as a man of shame, right? It's like I'm also ashamed to be a white male and to have benefited personally from all of the oppression that white men have fostered throughout history, right? I've been the beneficiary of that. I live in a society where it's beneficial to be male and white. And, you know, maybe I got every job that I ever got because I was white, because I looked right. You know, I don't know. I haven't had to struggle the way that others
Yeah.
have in
Yeah.
that way. Um, and I think that for me, spirituality, working with Tibetan Buddhism specifically, but also with ayahuasca and other plant medicines, has really helped me expand my vision of my own masculinity, to embrace the power and beauty of the masculine divine, and to recognize the need for the divine feminine. Like, we have oppressed and subjugated and hidden away and denied the power of the divine feminine, um, like systematically, so that in order for a woman to express that, I mean, she has to be radical and strong and um, amazing.
Yeah.
And so I see, we have an obligation to do whatever we can to foster the recognition and development and uh, support of the divine feminine in all the ways that it expresses itself, because we seem to be way out of balance societally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those of us who wield the power and have the benefit have to be the agents of that change, I think. Just don't ask me how.
It's a big question. Yeah, I just read about that, I guess yesterday or today, that there's been like another shooting on 4th of July, like from a guy,
Yeah.
from a man, or a very young man, kind of. I mean, he looked young, not really young, but still. I mean, you live over there in USA. Like, how do you perceive all of that? And also, like before yesterday, like in the last few weeks, been very present again in the media. But
Yeah.
when is it not really present? Because it happens so often, unfortunately. Like, how do you see that? And I don't know, you've been a cop. Maybe that's also like another different perspectives on maybe those kinds of people who do these things, and like what's going on there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's definitely a pathology at work. I think in most mass shooters, we can see that there's a pathological unhappiness, but I can't escape viewing it from the Tibetan Buddhist lens, right? The Buddhist lens of
Mm-hmm.
um, why is there this behavior? It's due to ignorance. It's due to aversion and grasping. The same thing that affects all of us, but in certain people, um, that ignorance is so great and their grasping and aversion is so powerful and their inhibitions are so low that they can, you know, do these horrific acts. And that's always part of our human condition, right? We can kill each other, and we can and do and always will keep doing it. It's never going to go away. Um, this particular flavor of loading up with a bulletproof vest and a couple of rifles and backpacks full of ammunition, and then slaughtering innocent, defenseless children or unarmed strangers. It's like, how is that masculine? How is that macho? How is that the embodiment of anything that anyone would want to emulate? It's pure cowardice. It's pure evil. I and I can only think that these people carry so much pain and so much rage. I mean, I guess I can look back to when I was in a similar situation where I had all these suicidal thoughts and I couldn't think of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it wasn't really that I wanted to end my life. It's just that I did not have the tools to understand how to live a life successfully.
Yeah.
I was just ignorant. I love life, right? Life is wonderful. But when you don't know how to do it, it, it can be the source of, great torment. So I think, especially once we see that same process repeated again and again and again and again and again, it's become like a meme. It's a particular virus of behavior. Um, And it arises out of our own social pathology. It's not because of that person who pulled the trigger, because
Yeah.
that person who pulls the trigger keeps showing up again
Yeah.
and again and again and again in
Yeah.
community after community after community. If we look at it as a disorder, as a virus, we can see it has nothing. Those people got infected by the virus,
Yeah.
right? But they are not the cause of it. The cause of it is our societal structure, our inability to love each other, our inability to support each other, our inability to tolerate and celebrate difference. It's our sickness, and it's expressing itself through these individual acts. But you can kill every one of those people. You can put them to death. You can shoot them at the scene before they escape. But that does absolutely nothing to address the causal factors.
Yeah.
And and gun control isn't going to be the solution either. We need to fundamentally rethink how we care for each other as human beings. I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
think about these stories from our early tribal world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we lived in small scale tribal communities of up to 1 or 200 people. And when someone committed a grave offense, they would be confronted by the whole community, gathered and then loved and supported, and they would try to heal that person from whatever was causing them to do this terrible action. And then if that doesn't work, then you stab them with spears until they're dead. But first you try the loving
Yeah.
approach, right?
Yeah.
To fix what's wrong. Yeah, it's a pathological masculine dysfunction, but it's not because they're men. It's because they live in a society that doesn't value not just them, it doesn't value anyone. It doesn't
Yeah.
treat anyone as authentic, essential, good, necessary parts of the world. We're all just garbage, and some of us feel that more strongly than others. That's
Oof.
ugh. And
Yeah.
the only thing that we can do is love like our hair is on fire. Love
Because it
everyone that
is.
we encounter, right?
Yeah.
We have this obligation to make that Bodhisattva ideal visible in the world through every human interaction that we have. And that means that we have to stretch ourselves. We have to stretch our capacity so that I can love people who disagree with me. I can love people with whom I disagree. I can love and cherish and respect people who have profoundly different views than my own. And we just don't do that. We pick a side and then the other side is wrong. And then
Yeah.
we surround ourselves with people who agree with our take on reality. And that gives us permission to put all of the garbage on the outside group, the group that doesn't belong. And that is, we're reaping the fruit of that way of being. And we need a foundational shift.
I guess that's also one of those things that kind of brought me to my, in quotation marks, awakening, or to my journey of discovering myself and learning about myself and trying to understand what's important in this world and how I should live and how I should be and behave myself and who I am, really. Yeah, but that also got like very much inspired by or jump-started also by my experiences in school, which were deeply infected by how we as a society treat people. And for me, it was also mostly just getting this feeling of you're garbage. Like either you perform, either you like deliver, you do everything that's expected from us to you, no matter how you feel or what you want or whatever. And if you don't live up to that, then like just fuck off, you piece of shit. Like
Totally. Right?
like we don't want you here. And that's like so often been the message. And then also
perfection is the bare minimum standard. It's like if you do everything right, then that's just okay. Right?
Yeah, it's okay. Like
it's okay.
Then you just got to do that for 60 years or something, and
Right.
then maybe you get a popsicle or something.
Right.
or then we just forget about you, and then you can just see how you survive by yourself.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. And also, if we think about it like as a virus, like you just said, it's also beautiful, because then I can also say that also my mother really just got infected by that virus. And like, I think I know her as the person who she is, and she's just extremely loving and just beautiful in the way she is. But she got so much of that, of that pressure, of that fear. And then she translated that fear, or she gave that fear onto me of, oh my God, my child needs to perform. And now I need to tell my child that it also needs to perform, and so trapped in this infection. And something that I also needed to think about earlier when you were talking about this lens of thinking planetary, interplanetary, galactic, and everything, like how much of that is inside of our schools?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, the lens is, I don't know how small it is, but it's extremely small. It's like sometimes like pseudo planetary, because sometimes you talk about history and everything, but in the end, like what's expected from you, again, it's nothing like in a greater scheme or with love or with care and what's out there. It's just, very mechanical and dry.
Yeah.
What's not so dry, and what I thought I also want to ask you about, is like your dogs. Like, you have 2 of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they have Buddha nature?
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I think being in relationship with these animals that, don't have speech and don't have, we don't share a common language, and yet we communicate constantly, day and night. And they have, very strong inner lives, emotional resonances, preferences, things that they don't like. I mean, they're just like us. They're these beautiful beings that have qualities of awakening, qualities of Buddha nature, and they have their own obscurations. They have their own veils that give rise to their own sense of suffering. And I think it's for me, it just enriches my life so much to be around an alien being who, unlike us, they relate to their world with a lot of love and affection and interest and curiosity. And they tend to not ruminate on the past or become anxious about the future. They're very present moment oriented. And every phenomenon that arises to their senses is worthy of investigation. They're interested in it and they go check it out, and then they're on to the next thing. So they're great teachers for those of us who get trapped in our heads and spend a lot of time thinking about the past or worrying about the future. They give you this constant Zen instruction, right? Let go of that stuff. And I think that sense of love, they want your love and affection, and they ask for it shamelessly. They have no artifice, right? They just pet my belly, love me, give me some loving, and they will reciprocate that love fully and unreservedly. And they will do it with someone who just walks in the door, right? They don't care about what your job is or how much money you make or what your political orientation or sexual orientation or spiritual orientation is. They just, hey, you smell nice. Let's play. Let's, pet me. And we can relate to each other and the world in that way. There's nothing that is preventing us from doing that, except for our own conditioning and our own fear. It's really just fear. Fear of feeling silly, fear of being rejected, fear of, what people will say or think about us. But, the instruction anyway is to love, right? That is the instruction. And to love recklessly, to love openly, to love without discrimination, to love like the sun shines and illuminates everything without any determination of, oh, I'm only going to shine over here and those people are screwed, right? You just shine, just love. And yeah, it's nice to have those little potent talismans and reminders in your life running around, to remind me to keep my heart open. I think it's really good.
So is practice the way to deal with that fear, or how do we get to express
awareness
more
is the
of that
way,
love?
right? Awareness is the way, and then practice is what allows us to develop our awareness and our wisdom, right? But the truth reveals itself to us once we can see with clarity, once we can push aside our programming, our hopes and fears, our incorrectly sized lenses that we view everything through. And so it takes practice to do that, right? The practice is what removes those binding lenses and clears away those obscurations so that naked truth is evident to us. And then we don't really need teachings, right? We just respond to what's directly there. But initially, yeah, at least in my case, I needed a lot of practice to peel away those layers that were obscuring my vision and obscuring my wisdom, my compassion, and my love. And the beautiful thing I think about practice is that it didn't require anything conceptual. I could think or believe whatever I wanted. I could think I was doing it great or think I was terrible at it. I could think it was going easy or it was very, very difficult. Or, I had a higher view or a lower view. It didn't matter. As long as I did the practice as described, then it did what it was supposed to do. It removed those obscurations. And then once the obscurations are removed and you can see a little bit further than you could see before, things become more clear and okay, I can see that valley. I'm going to go that way and keep going. And eventually the clouds all lift and it's just abundant, beautiful sunshine.
So when we talk about practice, and you talk about practice, maybe for people who are listening, like how exactly do you practice? Or like you said, you come from the Tibetan tradition, or that's what you mainly resonated with. Yeah. How does it look? Do you just sit down on a cushion and then what's going on? Or
Yeah, I think, well,
when
for
we
the
talk about formal practice?
for the last 18 years, mostly it looked like, um, you know, a solitary meditation practice, and then the addition of some either preliminary practices like prostrations and mantra recitation, Bodhisattva practice, um, some kind of a sadhana where you have a deity and you have a script that you read through and visualizations that you do and mantras that you repeat, and you sort of create this inner world of that deity, and you spend time every day with those recitations and those visualizations
Mm-hmm.
until you make a connection, until the visualization is so rich and vivid that it is self-sustaining. And then those qualities that are associated with that practice and that deity begin to be revealed in you. So, yeah, it's a lot of sitting meditation and then chanting and praying and visualizing, coupled with either solitary retreat in my home or out in the wilderness, or group retreat uh, as many times a year as I could manage. Usually was 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, um, and that was pretty much how it was for the last 18 years. But I would say in the last year and a half, I've really stopped almost all of my formal practice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Not that I recommend that to anyone else.
Yeah. It's a different story.
Yeah. But for me right now, my primary practice is this. It's like just being here, just attending to the nature of mind as appearances arise and fall away. So it's like a non-meditation meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So everything, in a way, even though I'm not practicing formally in the way that I used to, I feel subjectively like I never stopped practicing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
It's
it
just like
does.
my practice
Yeah.
has expanded into the naked world. And
Yeah.
so everything is practice, everything is the guru, everything is the field of blessings, and it really doesn't matter how that manifests to me, whether I'm happy or sad. I mean, I can still be sad, I can still be
Yeah.
anxious, I can still have the full gamut of the human experience, but it's all held within this spacious, accommodating field of bliss.
Did that was it like a conscious decision, like where you okay, like now I'm going to stop practicing, or were you just flowing with so much love and openness that like it didn't even make a difference anymore, or how was it?
Yeah, it was more like I started to feel um, like no matter how much practice I did, and I love practice. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a strong part of my identity. So I loved doing it and going into that space. Um, but I started to feel this subtle or not so subtle um, sense of too much agency, too much control, too much trying to mess with the outcome or mess with the
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I wanted to strip that away. Like I had no tolerance for anything coming between me and direct experience. Like I didn't want those structures anymore. All I wanted was direct experience unmediated by anything, my own ideas, my mind, certainly not anyone else's mind, not anyone else's ideas of what to do. And I don't know where I am right now in that way. Like, does it mean that I have completed my formal practice and this is the step of maturation? Maybe.
Hmm.
Or it might just be a pause before I dive back
Yeah.
into formal practice again. Um,
Yeah.
or I might be making a terrible mistake and, abandoning practice just when it was starting to really bear fruit. And now I'm
Yeah.
just burning up all my good karma that I've accumulated. And I'll exhaust that and I'll go back to samsara. I don't know, but I trust myself. I trust
Yeah.
reality. So I feel like as long as I'm in an honest connection with reality, then I'm fine with however things shake out. Like that's all I want is to be with what is in the most intimate and direct way with no filters. And so far that's what it's been like.
Yeah. There are two things like that I also, mine kind of see in myself. Like there's this one thing when I practice for certain duration of days or weeks or months, then when I stop, I definitely have like maybe a week, or it depends on how much I practice, where I can not practice, but I'm still like in that space.
Yeah.
But then for me, it's definitely more like, okay, I'm just falling off the cliff again or falling from wherever. And then I'm just lost again, just start crying and slowly get myself back to practicing. But on the other side, there's also definitely this tendency in myself that still not really quite able to deal with, or it sometimes just comes up and it's really strong. Like you said, just trying to control the outcome and just trying to mess around with everything so that there's just this one way of everything expressing itself. And then, I mean, kind of sounds sad when I talk about it, like in the
Mm,
way of like it doesn't make sense to confine reality to this is how I am and this is then how it's going to be. Like it's so anti reality or being or life.
mm.
But it's still difficult not to fall into that.
So your camera's frozen again.
Um,
Oh, there you go.
is it?
It was for a while.
Okay.
Seems like it's okay now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think we already talked about a lot of great stuff. Um, I still have a question about that nomad lifestyle that you were living, or
Oh, yeah.
like how did that came to be? Like, were you just, I don't know, sick of society, or just needed to break from, I don't
Yeah.
know.
That
Uh,
was mostly my wife. Um,
okay.
that was her impulse. We I think her experience, we were living in a small town and dealing with our daughter's addiction and problems and my job. And I think she was looking for a way to get out of that. And she found
Mm.
um, that sort of nomad community of van dwellers um, online and started becoming intrigued by that. And she started it on her own. She bought a van and we outfitted it, and she would go off on trips by herself and meet up with those people, and she had such a great time and she really loved it. So she started encouraging us to look into that as a full-time thing. And I was like, no way. I have 8 more years of work I got to do. I'm going to make all this money at the end of my career. It'll be great for my retirement. I have no interest
Yeah.
in that. But when I went to India on pilgrimage, um, I had a lot of experiences and breakthroughs, and it was a big deal for me. When I came back from India, I was like, I'm quitting my job tomorrow. Like, I'm done. And let's sell the house and let's buy a rig and let's do what you wanted to do. I think it just seemed perfect to me. And part of my ability to retire that early was dependent upon selling the house and getting rid of all of our overhead so that we could live really frugally. And once I started to do that math and look at it, I was like, yeah, we could live really great if we didn't have the house. We have a nice trailer and we can travel for as long as we want. And we tried it out, and it was the perfect thing for us for a number of years. It really allowed us to see the country in a way that we had never seen it before, and to learn how to live gracefully with a lot less and be way, way, way more connected to Mother Earth. Like, we were spending all day and all night outside under the stars in the sunshine. It was a really beautiful way to live.
And now, I mean, Palm Springs, like is it the desert or is
It
it
is the
right on the
desert.
edge or?
Yeah, it's the desert. It's blisteringly hot in the summertime, and it's pretty hot even in the wintertime. You get high winds through here. It's a challenging and sparse environment, but it's sort of like the sea. It reminds me of the sea. It's very powerful. It's very impersonal, and it's filled with beauty once you become acclimated to where beauty expresses itself in that environment. I've fallen madly in love with it.
That was kind of like one of my intuitions, like about the desert. I mean, I've been to the desert, but maybe also not so much like in recent years. But yeah, my thought was just like, oh my God, is it beautiful enough? Like, are there enough trees, or like, is there enough to see? But of course, like,
Yeah, I think it takes a while. It's not immediately evident, like going to the ocean or going to the mountains where it just, blows you
yeah,
away. It's much more subtle. But once you get acclimated, the beauty is really profound. I think those harsh environments generate uh, a really distilled and intense beauty that I've really come to love.
it also made me think about the Jesus story, where he was like fasting in the desert and everything.
Mm,
And I don't know the details what happened there to him or what not happened to him, but yeah, it seems to have its significance. Yeah.
it's definitely a good place for spiritual challenging and spiritual growth, for sure.
Maybe just one last topic, then we can round this up. You've now been in the relationship with your wife like for quite a long time, right?
Yeah,
Like,
36
yeah.
years.
Wow. That's yeah, that's quite something, especially if I look around myself and like my generation, and just yeah, I guess not that many people there are close to 36 years. I mean, it's not even possible because they're still so young, but
Right. Give them time.
yeah, we'll see. But still, I guess if they heard about that, or if they were given that option by a genie or something, I guess not many would take that, or at least a lot of them would be very skeptical.
Right.
But yeah, how's that been for you? Also, like from a spiritual side? Also, like, did you like go through all of that together, or?
Yeah, I think you know, I count my wife as my greatest spiritual blessing, the greatest blessing of my life. And you know, over all these years together, we've been through many marriages. We've been through many identities. We've had to forge and reforge this commitment over and over and over again and allow the previous version to die and mourn it and then build something new. So, you know, I totally get that, people want a new relationship after 5 years or 7 years or 12 years, and you don't fit into that same relationship that you entered. And that's just a sign of growth, right? If you felt exactly the same, well, your partner would leave you because they'd be sick of it. But yeah, for whatever reason, the initial attraction and love that I felt for her and that she felt for me, um, I don't know, was strong enough that we were able to navigate those first few conflicts and still decide that we wanted to stay together. And then, you know, I don't know, there's a certain tenacity, a certain doggedness that is required to keep something like that going. Um, but yeah, she's my greatest teacher, and she's changed me as much as anything on the path has, and changed me not into something that I wasn't, but helped me become who I most truly am, right? And stuck with me through all of those versions of myself that were really far from ideal. you know, she got to see the worst of me and still, stuck it out. But yeah, marriage is a profound spiritual practice. You're completely, if you're in a real marriage, you're exposed, you know, you're not hiding from your spouse, you're exposed to your spouse. And they have different ways of seeing the world, I mean, that's the beauty of it, I think. She sees the world in a completely different way than I do, and she notices things that I fail to notice, and um, she acts as a great counterbalance to my own inclinations and my own way of seeing the world. And I love her for that. And hopefully I can do the same for her, to fill in, like, we make one complete person pretty good. Like, put us together, we can make pretty good decisions. But, you know, it's also been the most scalding and heart-wrenching and grief-filled and boring and tedious and, everything. It's the whole thing in there. And, I treasure every bit of it. I wouldn't give 1 minute of it up. And I hope we live till we're 500 and I can stay with her the whole time. Yeah. And, to be able to spend my life loving one particular being, it's such a great blessing. It's so instructive. There's a quality of love that is around after 20 or 25 years that's very different from the first 3 years or 5 years. And it's just not available to people who haven't put in the 20 years of work. you know, and you can't explain it to someone who hasn't done that. And there are plenty of people who put in the years, but they don't put in the work. And so they're still living the same year of their marriage over and over and over again. They might pick year 11, right? And just keep repeating that forever. We've been blessed that we were not ever able to do that. Our lives changed so much, our external lives changed, and our inner lives. We both continue to grow and mature and challenge each other. So we had to renegotiate that thing over and over and over again. But yeah, definitely one of my best teachers.
Sounds amazing to me. Is there like maybe any advice you would give maybe people who are new to marriage, people who are new to
Yeah.
relationships, just generally?
Yeah, I think the mistake that I made in the first years of our marriage was I really tried to manage how she saw me, how I appeared to her, and I wanted to manage how she reacted to things, how she reacted to me. Um, so I tried to keep everything good and positive, and it was kind of fake in a way. I wasn't as vulnerable as I needed to be, and I wasn't. I was still looking at love in a quasi transactional way. If I do all of these things to be a good husband, then you will be a good wife and you will provide for me all of these things that I need out of my partner and my
Yeah.
life. Um, and then if you have shortcomings, if you don't meet my ideals, then I can confront you about that. And we can work on your behavior so that you can make me happier. And I can work on my behavior so I can make you happier. But it wasn't until I was really pretty deep on the path and I started to realize, oh, I'm going about this all wrong. And that I needed to see her for who she really was and to be who I really was. And then work on compromises from that position, right? So you have to get really honest with yourself. You don't have to know everything, but you have to be really brutally honest. And that means being able to say, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what I want next, but I know I hate this and I hate that. And to let your partner be who they are. Like whatever they do to make themselves happy, you be happy about, right? Or don't be with them, right?
Yeah.
But like I was able to really be a good partner and a good husband to Yoli once I really was okay with her not being in the marriage anymore, right? Like whatever you want to make you happy, you go do. And I will be here and I will support you for that. If that's leaving my ass, go. you know, that's fine. Will it make you happy? If it will make you happy, then go do it. And, you know, I couldn't do that until I was okay with myself, until I wasn't, you know, asking her to fill all of my voids and to bring me the peace that I wanted. Like, and I think that's a large part due to my Buddhist training. Like, you start to see, oh, everything out there is a function of what's going on in here. So I can't look to someone else to fill this void. I have to fill it. I have to be the source of love. I have to be the source of acceptance. And then if you can do that, then it's much easier to be partnered in an authentic way. Yeah, so it requires a lot of self-honesty, tremendous courage to be able to let your partner have all the space in the world, you know? And then if they want to be with you, they'll be with you. And that's great. And if you want to be with them, you'll be with them. Yeah. And then a sense of humor. Like really be able to laugh at her, be able to laugh at yourself, be able to laugh at the whole thing. That will save your ass a lot.
Yeah, how's that? How do you combine this kind of you yourself being the love, and you fill your void, and you develop yourself and your acceptance and your love, but then at the still same time there's like this other human being who you're in relationship with, and then I mean there are certain expectations, right? That the other person does, or is it just completely okay, we just fit so well together that it's, I don't know, not even there?
I know for me, I had to sort of start from the position that I wasn't going to make any demands at all. So if she's going to be rude, then I'm going to accept that. If she's going to be distant, I'm going to accept that. If she's going to take a lover, I'm going to accept that. If she's going to whatever, I'm just going to accept her. That's my bedrock. Whatever she wants to do for herself as an authentic human being, I'm going to respect and love, even if I disagree with it. And I'm not going to say, no, I need you to do this. I need you to behave in this way, you know.
Oof.
But then, you know, you still do work out those compromises. You still do mitigate each other's behaviors and stuff. But I think until I was really willing to do that radical, like, this bullshit ends with me. I'm responsible for me. If I feel unloved and unhappy, that's not on her. That's on me. And whatever, if I truly love her, how can I love her? How can I express that? Well, she should feel completely unencumbered. She should feel like the world is hers to do with what she will. And if I'm part of that vision, I will be very happy. If I'm not, I will be very happy for her that she finds someone better than me. And I was lucky that she didn't call my bluff, I guess, you know. But I think honestly, you know, I became a much better partner, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to tolerate someone who only wants the best for you, right? Who's not constantly trying to get you to do their thing, or, you know, play their music, or soothe their feelings, or, you know, be tended to and uh, parented in a way, you know. Like, we have this romantic version of love where you're supposed to do this and supposed to do that, and you're supposed to feel this way and supposed to feel that way, and it doesn't make room for the actual human being. It only makes room for a sliver of that human being. And if you're going to be with a human being for a long time, a large part of your life, you owe it to yourself to be with that actual human being in the fullness of their self-expression, in the fullness of their individuality and their, you know, unique karmic imprints. That's the joy of being partnered, right? You don't want to be in a partnership with an idea of who your partner is. And that's how I lived for a long time. It took a long time before I actually admitted the whole entity of my wife into that relationship. But once I did it, it was transformational.
That's like, oof.
It was the scariest thing I've ever done. You know, it's total vulnerability. It's total willingness to push all your chips in and say, you know, whatever you want.
There's like such an incredible freedom in what you're saying, and giving that other person that freedom. Whew. Like the girlfriend from a friend of mine, I was actually with her in school like for a few years, and they now have a baby, and are roughly like the same age as me. And that's also been sometimes just wonderful, like just to see them and how they treat like this child, especially also maybe with this freedom or this level of love, because the child's crying and it's pooping and doing whatever, just like being completely not useless, but just can't help itself. But then they still just come up to their child and show love to that child and embrace him and give their love to him, which is just incredible. But she actually, like one time I was talking with her and I think I asked her like, how do you understand love or what is it about? And she was just telling me, yeah, just being completely open to the other person, like to express themselves. And I kind of forgot about that, like in the last few months and maybe years. Well, last year, 2 years, I don't know. But maybe I can give you some like concrete situations in my life where I would really like to know like how you understand them or how you feel about them, because yeah, for me it sometimes feels very difficult to completely accept other people, because I do still have this tendency or this feeling or the certain point where I'm like, okay, you can do this, this and that, but if you cross like this line or if you go to this point, then I like just cannot live with you, or I cannot be with that or accept that. But I saw this in another friend of mine, like very radically, where he kind of just phased out every friend and every just person in his life, kind of where he just like on his own, which seems kind of extreme, or I don't know, maybe it's necessary, maybe it's the right thing, but I'm not so sure about it, because eventually he also phased me out of his life, and that was not like in a healthy, positive, healing kind of way. It just was very rough and violent and just not gentle or anything, where I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm just here. I just want the best for you. And of course, maybe that not always like clearly communicated or not shown in my actions, but like really like I don't understand how you then just behave like that, but there's this one theme like in my life where like especially with phones nowadays, like you can kind of always be available, or you can always kind of should be available.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think it's also very difficult for me like then to let people communicate on their own time with me sometimes. Or there's this weird thing where there are people in my life, like one of my oldest friends, but also one woman or partner I had like 1.5 years ago or something, where I know they are happy for me, or they like me and they sometimes want to communicate with me and they don't have bad feelings towards me. But I kind of can't allow that to do that on their own time or in their own way. And then for me, I kind of just feel like I need to close myself like completely from them.
Mm.
But then I at the same time also feel sad like about both of them, like regularly, or it always comes up inside of myself that I'm just sad about not being able like to be connected with them. But
Mm.
and it's weird because I kind of want to be connected with them and I feel that they want to be connected with me, but I can't allow it. And then when you were talking about this, yeah, just being completely responsible for yourself, for myself, for if I don't feel happy, it's on me. If I don't feel loved and whatever, it's on me. And you do what you want to do and you live your life the way you want to live your life and the way you are. It just makes me question like how sensible or how just healthy the way I deal with that is.
Mm.
And it also like happens in smaller situations or with other people, of course, people who I haven't had so much karmic stuff going on. And there it also like just kind of strikes me sometimes because like I meet some people maybe and like we have a good connection, everything seems great, and then afterwards they don't behave like I think they should behave, and then just hurts me, and then I cut myself off. It just
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I think, I mean, I resonate with that so much. And I think from early childhood, we're conditioned to this kind of transactional behavior as it relates to love and support and feelings of safety and feelings of being loved and treasured. We learn in early childhood that everything that we do isn't okay and that there are consequences for pooping our pants or, letting the dog out or breaking the vase or, eating the ice cream or whatever we've done, said something weird to the church lady or whatever. And we get punished, right? We get told in this way, you know, and when we're very young, those punishments hurt a lot. It's the punishment of love being and approval being withheld. And I think that we internalize that language, that transactional aspect, and it creeps into everything that we do. And it reveals this subtle ways in which we're not taking responsibility for ourselves and we're not respecting the functioning of karma, and we're looking outside for approval, for affection, for feelings of safety, for sexual excitement. Um, and we believe, both because of the way that our society orients us outwards and from our own conditioning as children, where we don't have any power and we're completely dependent upon the source of love for our happiness and well being. So we moderate our behavior and the way that we appear in order to keep that love flowing in whatever way that's required. So some of us learn this thing, some of us learn something else. But as long as we continue under that misapprehension that somehow what someone else does affects me, affects my feelings of worthiness, my feelings of connection, my feelings of love, um, we're going to just keep repeating that mistake. And we're going to build traps for those that we love so that they
Mm.
are destined to fail us. And that's what your friend is experiencing. Well, I set all of these preconditions, and if you really love me, you'll follow all of them. And then when you don't, I cut you out of my life. Well, that's the logical end of that, is that he's left all by himself, right? And it's because of this misapprehension of the way that love actually functions. And the way that love functions successfully is that we recognize we are the source of love. And that love, when we connect through our inner work, through meditation and through spiritual development, we find that we are the source of love. We are God. We are Christ. We are Buddha. And then that permeates our being. It permeates our essential self, our subtle body, our physical body, and it permeates our ego structures so that we don't have the need for a false outer source for that. We recognize ourselves as source. And then when we do that, we're in touch with completely abundant, endless supply of bliss, love, openness, joy, contentment. And then that radiates out from us. It spills over. We're like a reservoir that can't contain all of that love. And then those around us just get drenched in it, right? Our partners, our friends, our families, strangers that we meet, they just get drenched in this overabundance of love. And then whatever anyone does, it doesn't affect how much I love them. It doesn't affect certainly how much I love myself, right? And then who doesn't want to be around someone like that? Like, who doesn't want to be partnered with someone who, accepts responsibility for their own feelings and accepts other people have their own way of being and their own way of feeling and their own way of, you know, being in the world. And all that you want to do is be around that person, however they do their thing. Um, and then that's a more solid foundation. It doesn't mean that you'll stay together. It doesn't mean that the marriage will work out or the relationship will work out, because there's also these karmic aspects, right? That relationships are going to last a certain amount of time, no matter what, and then they're going to come to an end. When the causes and conditions no longer support that union, it will fall apart, no matter how much you love each other, right? So, yeah, the closer you can get to understanding yourself and connecting with yourself as the source of love, as the source of light, as that which you seek, right? Sat Chit Ananda, you are that. Then, you know, partnering becomes a joyful expression of that and a sharing of that. And it's not a trap or a prison for your partner. It's not a minefield that they have to negotiate between how they want to do things and how they know that you expect them to do things, which just sets up conditions for dishonesty and betrayal and hiding and secrecy and manipulation. Because you can't win that game, right?
Yeah.
You can't make someone else happy, and someone else can't make you happy, no matter what they do. But no one talks about that.
At least you're talking about it right now.
But it requires, no one wants to hear it either, right? Because it requires a tremendous amount of maturity, a tremendous amount of clarity and courage to say, okay, this is how I'm going to live. This is how I'm going to behave. And I'm going to accept the consequences of that. But I'm determined to do this. But for me, once I made that fundamental shift, my marriage just became a field of bliss.
There's this one thing you were talking about. It's like setting up traps for the people you love or for other people.
Yeah.
And there was this like little voice inside of me, like in the last few weeks maybe, where I was kind of just asking myself, like in a very quiet way, just very gentle, like, am I not just setting all those people up? Like, am I just like not allowing themselves like to be the way they are, or like, isn't it just me like who's there, like not allowing something and just suppressing it in a
Mm.
way? And then that thought also came again, I think maybe just yesterday or 2 days ago, in a more clear-cut kind of way, I guess, with this. It wasn't like an official relationship, but still intimate relationship I had with her. And then like regarding her, like this thought came up again, where I was just like, like before that, like I kind of always, like, maybe I didn't think of her like for days or weeks, but eventually like always this thought came up about her or just about the situation. And like it always felt like there's something like not quite resolved,
Mm.
or like it was always like a little bit sad or a little bit weird, a little bit tense. Just very subtle, but still like, huh, okay, weird. uh, yeah, and then just a few days ago was also just this thought, like every pain or all the suffering I experienced with her, like everything that we went through, like there was like just this voice inside of myself, and was like, it was all you, or like it was
Mm.
all me. Like it was not her fault or her wrongdoing or her evil intentions or something like that. Just was all myself. Like I can't blame her for anything, and I kind of know that, and I kind of try to forgive her, so to speak, or whatever. But you know, you can try that, or you can imagine yourself to do that and whatever. But I think deeply, I think I haven't completely deeply understood that in a
Mm.
way,
Yeah.
which is indicative of why it is still coming up all the time. And yeah, like I said, also with this other friend or other situations where, yeah, it's still weird. And then on the other side, I have my Zen teacher who completely also embodies like everything you just said about just giving this absolute radical freedom and love to all the people without any reservations and whatsoever, which
I think that's so important. Like I definitely, my teachers modeled that behavior for me. So I could see them relating to students that drove me crazy, right? How can you have this student who is so selfish and so out of control and so blah 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 blah, and they would just treat them with utter love and never demand that they change their behavior. They just accepted them and continued to teach them. And it was being around that kind of dynamic for years and years that really opened my heart and showed me both how radical that is and how effective it is, and how it's authentic. You know, I think that's where it derives its real power, is that it's authentic. You're not pretending to love someone. You're not pretending to have that affection for them. It's just love pouring forth, and it spills onto everyone. And when that love is given freely with no strings attached, then the recipient of that love like wants to be their best self. They feel free to be their best self. They can be 1,000 times more generous, a
yeah,
thousand times more present, because they're being accepted. They're all the threat is gone. All the red lights are
yeah.
gone. All the alarm and danger signs are gone, and they're safe. And then they can be their true, authentic selves. And that just makes you love them even more. But it all begins with you, right, Alex? Like you are the source of that happiness. You are the source of self-love and self-acceptance. Like it has to begin with you treasuring your imperfect self and holding space for your imperfect self, warts and all. Like you can't give that to someone else until you possess it.
Oof.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, it's also fascinating, like how often we need that reminder, like just really again and again. It's like, yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of this whole, the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Those reminders are present for us wherever we turn, in our teachers, in the teachings themselves, in the company of those who are also engaged on the path authentically, and in the very nature of reality. All we have to do is attend to it, and it opens itself up to us and supports us. And just like that voice that you heard, right, on your DMT experience, it's like,
Yeah.
look at this, open to this. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, well, open to this other thing and try this. There's this generative, loving force that is a foundational aspect of our reality, and it's there for us all the time, and the stronger we can touch into that, the more it infuses everything that we do, everything that we experience, and lights us up from within.
Amen.
Amen.
Right now I feel like just going like through forest like for just 5 or 10 hours, just like just wandering around.
Well, you've been a very generous host, Alex.
Yeah, and you've been a very generous guest. Yeah, and yeah, also like this love we were just talking about. Like in the end, I guess it's just like that quality, like especially, I guess, of planet Earth, but like mothers in general, who are like, when we look at our people who are like one of the closest forms, like in, I guess, everyday life or in normal relationships, so to speak, where at least I can see that or I can feel that from my mother, which is also like incredible. Like just when I just think about it right now, like where I'm really like, sometimes, I mean, I haven't told her that. Maybe I should.
You should.
But yeah, that definitely. But what I meant was like, just this feeling inside of me of like, how can you love me so much? Like, I don't deserve this. Like, what do you see that's here that deserves like so much of that affection? It's like, you're just crazy for doing that. Yeah. I guess same with my teacher, and same energy with you just being here. Yeah. I guess it's a good place just to wrap this up.
Yeah, I feel like we came full circle, and we really had a beautiful journey. I really appreciate the opportunity to share all of that experience, and I hope that it's of benefit to your listeners. I definitely enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I hope it's benefit for other people, but it's definitely also been kind of like a therapy session just for me. Like,
Excellent.
so at least there's one person who had benefit from this, or two.
Yeah.
Both of us. So
both of us.
Yeah, I definitely hope there are going to be more people who can tune into this. Yeah, do you maybe want to plug yourself somewhere, like your Instagram, maybe your website, maybe whatever, something?
On Instagram, you can find me at The Awakened Heart. And that's pretty much my only outlet. So,
yeah. For the people listening to this, I can also put this like in the show notes or in the podcast description of this episode. So then you can just click on it there directly.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear from anyone who listens and has questions or feedback. It'd be great to hear from you guys.
Yeah. And then we can share like a few words after I stop the recording.
Yeah.
But I guess that's it for this episode. We're now like almost closing in on 3 hours, a little bit less.
Wow.
But yeah, it's been a blast. It's been really enriching. I don't know, something along that. Yeah, and everyone, just thank you for watching. You will see everything you need in podcast description. You know where to find my other stuff. If not, just ask me. Ask Scott if you have any further questions about reality and love. And yeah, enjoy your day, enjoy your evening, enjoy your night, whenever you're listening to this. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Bye.